Electricast. Imagine what's possible when learning doesn't get in the way of life. At Capella University, our game-changing FlexPath learning format lets you set your own deadlines so you can learn at a time and pace that works for you. It's an education you can tailor to your schedule. That means you don't have to put your life on hold to pursue your professional goals. Instead, enjoy learning your way and earn your degree without missing a beat. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
Be honest. When's the last time you had a homemade meal? We get it. Between meetings, workout classes, and the kids' after-school sports, who's got time to cook? That's where HelloFresh comes in. No matter how busy you get, HelloFresh has everything you need to get an easy, home-cooked meal on the table. With flavor-packed recipes like Parmesan herb-crusted salmon, you'll be filling your kitchen with the cozy aromas of a homemade meal in no time. So go ahead, try HelloFresh. It's homemade, made easy. Learn more at HelloFresh.com.
This week on the Deep Leadership Podcast.
Innovation is a team sport. For example, if we had the best idea in the world, but we can't persuade somebody to execute, then that idea isn't going to go anywhere. So everything requires a team, which is why I then got into this whole team achievement versus high-performing teams, because it's so critical to build a team around us that can execute on what we need to execute on.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Now, the purpose of this podcast is to build a world with better bosses, and we do that by introducing you to the greatest minds working in the leadership space. Now, our goal is to provide you with practical information to help you along your leadership journey, whether you're new to leadership or a seasoned pro. So thank you for listening in. It's an honor to be your host and leadership guide in this journey. So today's episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, Cadre of Men, and Pharaoh Skincare. And you can find links to all of my sponsors and all of my books in the show notes. Now, today we're talking about what it takes to create a high-achieving team. And my guest is Stephen Gaffney. Stephen joins us to unpack what it takes to move a high-performing team into a consistently high-achieving team. Now, as leaders, we get paid for results, and achievement is essential to success. So what do the best leaders do to consistently get higher team performance? Well, listen into this insightful episode and find out. So are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Stephen Gaffney. Stephen is CEO of Stephen Gaffney Company and is the leading expert on creating consistently high-achieving teams. He has helped leaders and teams from Fortune 500 companies, U.S. government, military organizations, and industry giants such as Amazon, Marriott, Lockheed Martin, and American Express. He is the author of Unconditional Power, Thriving in Any Situation, No Matter How Frustrating, Complex, and Unpredictable. And this book provides practical methods for helping leaders tap into their inner power at a moment's notice. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more from his knowledge and expertise. So, Stephen, welcome to the show. Thank you. And thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's an honor to have you on the show. And I'm interested in learning from your experience and your knowledge. But I thought we'd kind of go back to the beginning. So, you have an interesting backstory, and I wanted you to kind of share with our audience. How did you come to develop sort of an engineering and a scientific perspective of thinking about human relationships? So how did that come about? Because that's very interesting.
Well, my dad's an engineer, and he has 7 U.S. patents. And I actually never thought I was much like him growing up because I didn't know much about the engineering in that way. Math, science that way, but I was always intrigued by human relationship issues. And so just always been kind of an upfront, honest person, which we can go in that direction as well. And then started speaking about motivation and communication, and then developed a 9-step process on how to resolve any issue with anyone, basically how to have an honest conversation and get an issue resolved.
And then that led into team stuff and developing a process to create a high achieving team. And then at a certain point in that process, I realized I'm a lot like my father. You know, approaching a problem, although I approach it a human relationship problem and break it down into steps. And here's the reason why, because if we don't break it down, we can't really do it. And so a lot of stuff are conceptual or nice ideas, but what exactly do we do to have the difficult conversation, have great teams and issues like that, or challenges like that?
It's interesting. I love it. I have had a lot of guests on the show, and I'm an engineer by training, right? And so here I am, having a leadership podcast for the past 5 years. I study leadership. I practice leadership. But it's interesting. I come from an engineering and science perspective. So that's why I thought it was interesting to see where that came from, because I see the same thing. I think there's a lot of, even though every person is different, there are certain things that are common in terms of dealing with people. So I think that the idea that there is a way to do things, there's methods that you can find, kind of resonates with me. So that's why I kind of what you do resonated with me as well.
And what's also interesting is as human beings, there's certain things that are innate in us that actually are very predictable. For example, listening reduces conflict. It always does. Nobody says, after listening to me, they really made me mad. It doesn't really happen that way. Laughter brings levity, right? And whenever somebody makes a joke, as long as it's an appropriate joke, it just brings levity to the situation. There's a lot of things that when we look back, there are universal principles. And so if we put those principles and then we create processes, then people can do it. So one of the most fascinating things I've figured out over the years or in experience is that when people needed to have a difficult conversation, they tend to avoid it because they don't know exactly how. And that's when I developed that 9-step process that made it very predictable that if you follow these processes, it'll work. And incidentally, just so people don't think, oh, he's just trying to sell something, I would just want to give them something right away. If they refer to your show and send us an email and say they referred to the show and they use something out of what we talked about, we'll send them a book called The Fish Isn't Sick, The Water's Dirty, basically the fish book, and it has this 9-step process, and we'll send it to them for free. All I ask is that they cite the show and cite that they've done something with the information that we're now talking about. So I'm going to give it to them. I really am passionate about people solving problems.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. And longtime listeners of the show, you'll know that we love free stuff. So we'll make sure we'll have that link in the show notes for that free book, but that's fantastic. So let's get into it a little bit. So we're talking about leaders and leadership. And I always say that leadership is a people business. That's something that I've noticed, after doing this for 30 years. But in your words, why are human relationships so critical to leadership?
Well, because nothing gets accomplished without people. I know that sounds so simple, but it always ends up being a people issue. I actually don't believe that there's any process issues. It's always a people issue. For example, somebody will frequently blame in companies, it's the process. Well, my comeback is, who's in charge of the process? Yeah. And why haven't they changed it? It still comes down to a people issue, which ultimately is a leadership issue. So whenever we're looking at bureaucracy, process, procedures, and if it's not working for an organization, why aren't we changing it? And that has a lot to do with people. And are we actually teaching people and helping people and leading people appropriately to change whatever needs to get changed so we can accomplish what we ultimately want to accomplish?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's all about people. Without people, I often say that without a crew, a ship is just a cold hunk of steel sitting in the harbor, right? A crew brings a ship to life, right? People bring our companies to life. People bring our ideas to life, our plans to life, right? Without them, especially as an entrepreneur like myself, without my team, I'm nowhere. I can't go and build the product and sell the product. And I need my team, that are motivated. They're excited to be here. They're engaged to be able to get what I want to get done in the world, right? So we need our teams to bring our companies to life.
Yeah, there's never ever been an individual that's won a championship. And somebody might say, well, that's not true. There's tennis players, there's golfers, there's people, individual sports. But actually, those aren't individual sports. They all have, the best golfers in the world, the best tennis players in the world. They have a coach. They have loved ones who help and support them. They have a team around them. And so everything ultimately is a team sport. Innovation is a team sport. For example, if we had the best idea in the world, but we can't persuade somebody to execute, then that idea isn't going to go anywhere. So everything requires a team, which is why I then got into this whole team achievement versus high performing teams, because it's so critical to build a team around us that can execute on what we need to execute on.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just touched on it. I want to get into it. You say that there is a difference between performing teams and achieving teams. So tell us what, because I think they sound similar, but you say they're different. And explain to what the difference is between a performing team and an achieving team.
Well, the issue I have with high performing teams is it doesn't really address what I think needs to happen and is happening in today's world. Let me explain. The word performing could be confused with hard work. And what we're about is not performance, but around achievement. Sounds similar, but how often have you said to somebody, hey, can you do this? And they go, what do you want me to do? I'm working hard. Well, the issue isn't about work ethic, it's about achievement. And in the end, we are judged on the results we produce. So on purpose, I focus on achievement, not performance. And then consistency. So we developed the terminology consistently high achieving teams, because it's not only about achieving, it's about doing it consistently. Because also, we've all been parts of teams that have done really great things, but then what happens afterwards? So how do we do this consistently? Hence, consistently high achieving teams versus the usual terminology, what I consider the older terminology of high performing teams. And that's the difference.
I really like that. Again, I think about it a lot as an entrepreneur with a relatively small team compared to what I had in my corporate days. But I always say that like our team is what makes our success, right? I often think of myself running like a Navy SEAL team, right? We're fully capable, and we have like all of our skill sets are complementary, and we're able to, even as a small team, do everything a big company can do. And so it's essential that we operate well as a team together. And so I love the idea of consistently high achieving teams, because again, if you're an entrepreneur and you have a small team, you better have a consistently high achieving team, right? Otherwise, you're going nowhere. Especially if you're going up against what I call land armies, the companies with very large, groups of people and resources compared to you as a smaller entrepreneur. So you better have a consistently high achieving team. Do you think it makes sense for just entrepreneurs, or does it make sense in larger companies as well?
Well, a lot of our work is with huge companies, right? With Marriott, Amazon, and then also government entities and in between. So Los Alamos National Laboratory, where they created the nuclear weapon, and they're a big client of ours as well. So when I do a lot of work with the military, here's what I want to leave people with, because they might say, okay, so I get achievement, performance, okay, this is nice. But I want to really get into what maybe is a central problem of all teams, all relationships of any size, and that is lack of honest communication. What I mean by honest communication is not about truth or lies. The biggest problem is not what people say, it's actually what they don't say to each other. It's what's not getting said that is really the critical issue. And what we need, the way to make teams really great, the central premise is you got to get this unsaid said. So how do we create that permission for people to really speak their mind? And then what do we do with that information? But what I've learned over the years is if you get people to really speak up and share what's on their mind, including ideas, actually an organization can be transformed. So everybody tends to focus on tone and body language and all this stuff around communication. That's nice. But the biggest problem is just what people don't say. How often have you thought, if they just told me that, I could have fixed the problem? I get calls, often and work with executives. And one of the biggest issues they have is they hate getting surprised and blindsided. Why didn't I know about that issue? So whether it's in the manufacturing, whether it's in the hospitality industry, whether in the engineering field, it's like, why aren't we aware of these issues, and why are there surprises, and how do we avoid it, and how do we fix this stuff moving forward?
It's interesting you say that, because I know one company I worked for we called it the good news company. Like nobody wanted to give bad news because, they had a shoot the messenger kind of mindset. So every time we would do business reviews, and I would sit around with my colleagues who were all general managers of our businesses, and everybody it was only good news, all the good news, all the good news. And then, every quarter there was always a surprise with one of the businesses, and it never came out. But it was because we didn't have that honest dialogue. We were holding back anything bad because we knew we'd get beat up in those meetings. So everybody just told the good news all the time. And that's why it was like a joke that we were the good news company and nobody brought up anything. And that's not a way. I know one of my expectations to my employees here is like, give me the facts, good, bad, and ugly. Don't spin it when it comes to me. I need to know as CEO, I need to know exactly what's going on. And give me the bad news, give it all the ugliness to me, and I'll figure out what to do. But I can't operate without that reality facing me, right?
It's interesting when you bring it up. And I've done work in Minnesota, and they call it Minnesota nice. You know what we're talking about. But I'm sure it's not just only in that state. I've had other clients where there's this culture of being nice. And there's nothing wrong with being nice. But actually, I reframe it. It's not nice to not share what the real issue is. That actually isn't helping out people. I mean, it's so interesting that over the years, somebody will say, I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. And it didn't want to bother them. And I'll say, well, by not saying it, you've actually hurt their relationship, and you've actually hurt them because they can't fix a problem. I mean, how often have somebody said to you, well, I didn't want to hurt your feelings? Like, well, I wish you had. I don't want my feelings to be hurt, but I definitely don't want you to not say what's really going on. So there are three things I want to give people immediate where to go with how to get this unsaid said. And that's by looking at the cause. The number one cause is fear. Fear of retribution, fear it's going to be used against us, some kind of fear, whether it's founded or not. The solutions are creating emotional safety, not psychological safety, which we could talk about, rewarding honesty, which we could talk about. And the third thing is really, really critical, is holding people accountable. And that actually things get done. We can address all of that. But I want to give people stuff, right, as they're listening, because I think we often listen to podcasts and, okay, these are nice concepts, but what do I do? Our job of leaders, which I'll just say, I think the number one job of leaders is not about creating a great vision, but creating an emotionally safe environment so people speak the truth.
I love that. And so let's break that down. So we have you mentioned three elements. Let's talk about those. So one of them is emotional safety, and not and so what we tend to hear is what psychological safety, right? So what's the difference between the two, and why should we be focused on emotional safety?
So my interpretation of psychological safety is that it's conceptually, cerebrally, we know that it's safe to bring things up. But that's not why people bring things up. We human beings make decisions on emotions, and we justify with logic. If you think about it, and then I'll back into this, how often have you bought something and then afterwards you're justifying why you bought it? You drive it off and say, well, I deserve it. I work really hard. You already made the decision, right? So even in the scientific engineering world, it's still we make decisions on emotions, but then we look for justification, logic. We need both. But why this is so important is the reason why I've experienced where people don't speak up is if they don't feel safe. Conceptually, they could know, well, I'm probably not going to get fired and nothing bad is going to happen. But if they feel anxiety or stress, have you ever been around somebody, just by the way they act, you just feel stressed around them? You're probably not going to speak up, even if you know nothing bad will happen if you do. So it's really important that we create that emotional safety. So let's look at why that doesn't happen. Have you ever had somebody say, listen, you please, I love honesty. You can tell me anything. So you can go ahead and you tell them something that they don't like, and then they flip out on you, or they get really upset. And you're like, why did I even go there?
Right.
I'm talking about.
Yeah, not that honest. I don't want you to be that honest, right? Yeah.
Or how about now what's happening is we live in the world of distractions. So as leaders, we don't create a meeting environment in which people put away their phones and they're focused on each other. So if I'm doing this under the table or whatever the case may be and trying to text people or, talking to other people while I'm sending a message that it's not really safe, or I don't really care about what that person has to say, no matter what I say, my actions are speaking louder than my words. So one of the things that we're experiencing is how little companies spend the time on creating ways we're going to operate in meetings. And in a remote world, it's really bad. I mean, I've worked with environments where people aren't even putting on the camera, and so people are doing all kinds of things. There's now even research that are showing that people who have full-time jobs in a remote atmosphere also have other full-time jobs. That's the ultimate of distraction, right? So here's the thing. I'm not saying remote work is bad. It's very appropriate in various things, but these are challenges we need to address. And no matter what, we have to create that emotionally safe environment.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you then talked about rewarding. What did you say exactly? You said rewarding.
Rewarding honesty. Yeah, rewarding it.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's an easy way to think about it. You get a questionnaire from a company. Do you fill it out? If you're like me, I basically don't. Why? Because I think that it's not going to do any good. I might get a thank you, but I don't see any results. Well, here's what happens in the workplace. I've seen a lot of companies spend a lot of money on, researching and doing employee surveys, which I think are great. But then they take 6, 7, 8 months to get the information out the door and then do something with it.
Yeah.
So inevitably, sometimes people feel safe to bring it up. Like they say, okay, I actually will speak my mind, but they don't because they say, it's just a waste of time. Nothing's going to change around here. So we have to reward honesty. We've got to do something with the information that we get to show that it's not just safe, but it's actually valued to speak the truth.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by Cadre of Men. Leadership is a people business, and for men, real growth happens alongside those who challenge and inspire you. Cadre of Men is your force multiplier, helping you achieve more strength, deeper connections, and a stronger sense of purpose. I'm proud to call myself a member of this dynamic group. Cadre of Men is built for men who refuse to settle. With dedicated forums covering fitness, fatherhood, business, and more, we provide the tools and camaraderie to help you thrive. Our weekly Zoom calls dive into tough, real-world topics, often featuring expert guest speakers who will push you to sharpen your skills and mindset. Monthly meetups include intense hikes and hands-on building sessions where you forge bonds through shared challenges. From fitness and finance challenges to mastering public speaking, Cadre of Men delivers actionable curriculum in leadership, business, and personal growth. If you're ready to step up, push past your comfort zone, and lead by example, Cadre of Men is for you. Inside the Cadre, we grow together, lead together, and rise together. Visit cadreofmen.com to learn more and take the first step toward becoming your best self. This episode is brought to you by Pharaoh Skincare. I would have never imagined I'd be talking about skincare, but this stuff is truly amazing. Pharaoh is revolutionizing skincare by replacing harmful chemicals with natural ingredients sourced from regenerative farms. Now, weightlifting is tough on the hands, and Pharaoh's Epic Dermis is the best product I've ever used to get my callous hands back to normal and stay in the game. Now I use it every day. Pharaoh also works to reduce fine lines, wrinkles, and improve overall skin health. As Pharaoh CEO Charles Mayfield likes to say, a little Pharaoh goes a long way. Deep Leadership Podcast listeners can save 15% off all of their products by using the code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at pharaoh.life. That's FARROW.life. This episode is brought to you by the Salty Sailor Coffee Company, the official coffee of the Deep Leadership Podcast. Salty Sailor is a veteran-owned coffee brand on a mission to deliver premium, fresh roasted coffee while making a positive impact in the world. Their motto is drink coffee and do good, which reflects their commitment to making amazing coffee and actively supporting the military community. 10% of every order goes to the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society, an organization dedicated to helping sailors, Marines, and their families in times of need. All our listeners get 10% off every order of their amazing coffee by using the discount code DEEP at checkout. So check them out at saltysailorcoffee.com.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things I do, for example, I've worked in a manufacturing environment my whole career, and I keep extra money in my pocket, in my wallet. So if someone catches me like from violating a safety, any safety protocol, right? Like I forget my safety glasses or I'm not wearing my safety shoes. If someone brings it up to me, I'll give them $20, right away. And so that sends the message that we're all looking out for each other. Safety is important. So I think the idea of rewarding honesty, where you say, thank you for bringing that up. And so not only are you creating a situation where it's emotionally safe, but you're saying, no, it's highly encouraged that you're honest. And I think that's you're creating an incentive for honesty.
Yeah, and you bring up a very important topic in safety. I do a lot in the nuclear industry as well, and people sometimes don't speak up because they either don't feel safe or they're like, "It's not my job. I don't want to or make somebody feel uncomfortable or whatever," or they probably have that figured out. And so when there's a safety issue that then gets exposed, you find out that other people saw it, but they just didn't say anything. That's why get the unsaid said is not only critical in just everyday kind of communication, but it's even critical in people's safety.
Yeah, no, I definitely see that. I love that. And the final thing you said is hold people accountable. And I'd love to hear your take on it because one of the things that I would say the number one issue why I've been effective over the years is just I have people do what they say they're going to do. I ask them what they're going to do and then I follow up with them. And I remember one employee told me one time, "You're the first person that's ever followed up on anything since I've worked here." And I'm like, "Well, that seems pretty basic." But what's your take on this idea of holding people accountable?
So I wrote an article, which they're welcome to. Again, they just have to cite the show, called All In Accountability. But it draws a really interesting distinction around the difference between medium kind of achieving teams and organizations and consistently high achieving teams. And here's the difference. Medium achieving teams are accountable to their boss, but great teams, consistently high achieving teams, are accountable to each other whether or not the boss is around. So they're going to call it each other whether somebody else is saying something. So if we're leading a team, I know my team is a great team if when I'm not around, they're calling out each other and holding each other accountable. They're not waiting for me or you to say something. That's the difference. And when it comes to speaking the truth, we have to hold people accountable. It's not okay to sit on something and not speak up. It's not okay to watch somebody in an unsafe situation and not say something. It's not okay to say, "I'm going to work this problem, but not let my boss know." It's not okay. And so how are we holding people accountable? But ultimately, great accountability is when we don't even need the boss or the leader. We're going to hold each other accountable because we each matter to each other and we care about each other.
Yeah, yeah. That's when you have, like you said, a consistently high achieving team. That's when you have it. When the leader is away and the team is still operating at a high level, it's not the leader that's just creating that situation. That's when you've really achieved something as a leader. That's my only hope is when I can walk away and everything is running usually better than when I'm there. And that's what I want to see, right? You want to see that team that's holding each other accountable to results.
It's interesting because it reminds me of a while back I did a speech for this company and we had all the top leaders in there. And we always do research before doing the speech so we get to know the audience. And so it was for these leaders. And there was a lot of issues, but one of the issues were, leaders don't hold people accountable. They're not moving forward. They're not taking action. So when I got the stage, I said, "Look, we did the research. I have a question. You were saying about accountability and not moving forward, but you all are the leaders. So what are you talking about?" So we often tend to blame others when it really is about what we can do and the difference we can make.
Yeah, absolutely. It does fall on us. So we have a lot of responsibilities as leaders to be able to do these things and create these conditions within our company. One question I have for you: you have a book called Unconditional Power, which is really interesting. Yeah, yeah. So I want to just to touch on it just a little bit. What do you mean by unconditional power? And so what is that and how does it really apply to leadership?
Well, have you ever noticed that when you're in a good mood, you're more successful, you're more innovative? I mean, and you can solve problems a lot easier. And the book is about how to get yourself and others in a good mood because morale really matters. I mean, just think about it. If we're in a great mood and somebody throws us a problem, we're like, "Hey, I got this handled." But if we're stressed or lacking sleep and somebody throws us a problem, we're like, "Here we go again." So mood and morale really does matter. And the book is about how to, manage that with not only ourselves, but with the team. And so there are three types of overall moods that I've kind of experienced and be able to categorize, again, kind of in that scientific engineering spirit. The first is a powerless mood. That's where we all have felt at times in our life, what difference can I make? I'm only one person here, or one person in the relationship, because even this applies at home. Then there's a conditional power mood and mindset which is that's where people say, and we've all said, I can get that done as long as that person cooperates, as long as I have the right resources, as long as I have enough money, as long as I have the right team or talent or whatever. But the desirable mood that great leaders have and where people really are extremely successful is being unconditionally powerful. Unconditionally powerful means I recognize their conditions, but I'm going to spend 100% of my energy on what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to spend zero energy on the conditions. I'm going to spend 100% on what we're going to do about those conditions. So an example would be, let's say we do lack resources. So what are we going to do about it? Versus spending time, if we just have the right resources, if we just have the right mindset, no, what can we do? How do we make things happen? And that's where you see over time, history has shown that individuals with teams and organizations as a whole have outproduced and outsmarted the competition because they thought of an innovative way around things because they focused on what could we do? I mean, people can say whatever they want around Elon Musk because I know there's a lot of politics now involved. But that guy's brilliant. Look at what he's been able to do. Look at what SpaceX has been able to do versus Boeing. Boeing has arguably way more resources, way more money and stuff. And SpaceX has had, I think, as of today, based on my memory, 15 successful launches. 15 versus Boeing has not had one. They still, I don't know, did they get their astronauts back? I don't even know if they got their astronauts back, right? So at what point do you recognize it is a leadership issue? It really isn't necessarily about resources and money. I'm not saying resources and money are not to be considered, but it's still, what are we going to do about it? And Elon Musk is a great example of this principle because it's around what are we going to do about it? So people can say whatever they want, but you could choose Elon Musk. You could choose a lot of great leaders. Martin Luther King, Gandhi over the years. I mean, we can choose many, many great leaders of all different sizes, but they said, what am I going to do about this situation? And they made a huge difference.
I love that you bring this up because I saw a lot during COVID where people were like victim mentality. We can't do anything. We're stuck. We have supply chain problems. They were throwing up a lot of reasons why they couldn't do what they wanted to get done. But then I saw the really creative types. They were finding ways to grow and expand their business during this major shift in the country and in the world. So they were more like, okay, this is the situation. Now, what am I going to do about it? Like people were changed their business models. They changed their approach. We were a small company, right? And they shut down all of the training for the people that use our products. So these meter techs, for example. So they shut down all the metering schools. Well, the people still need to be trained. So we started doing online metering schools, and then the word got out, and suddenly we had hundreds and hundreds of people attending our training, and we were the only ones do it. And I was the smallest company in my industry, and I'm doing these. I was getting a lot of attention because I was the one company doing that. But it was like, instead of saying we can't get together, like what else could we do? And so I love that idea of unconditionally powerful approach. It's like a mindset, isn't it? Is it a mind? Am I thinking it that way? You have to have the right mindset to be able to not be a victim.
There's 9 strategies in the book, but one of them is the way we look at something and reframing it. And that's what you're talking about. You saw this, other people saw it as a problem. You saw it as an opportunity. It's not that it's great that we're in a pandemic, but given that we're in a pandemic, instead of spending time on what we can't do, what could we do and what opportunities? So great reframe that I found that's really helped me over the years is every problem creates an opportunity. Every problem creates an opportunity. I'm not saying every problem is a good thing, but every problem creates an opportunity. So I'm with you on the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, just about all my sessions were, face-to-face, right? And suddenly there's only virtual as an option. I'd not done any virtual stuff to speak of much. And so I had to learn that whole trait. But now, whether it's in person or doing a virtual stuff, I'm very, very comfortable. And I learned that skill. I even used that kind of mindset when I went through cancer. So in 2009, I went through cancer. I'm fine now. But I had a bout of cancer, and 2009 was the same time as the Great Recession. And as some people may remember. And so one of the first things to go is, training, right? And softer stuff, although I think this stuff is critical to being successful in an organization. And so I'm faced with a health issue and a recession. So I could focus on what couldn't do anything about cancer, but I could do everything about how I was going to respond to the cancer. I couldn't do anything about the recession, but I could do everything about how I was going to respond to the recession. And that's about unconditional power. So focusing on what we can control and looking for opportunities. So what you see is during the pandemic, during all kinds of challenges, even back to the Great Depression, it's not that things are great, but there's always an opportunity. So we focus on the problem or we focus on the opportunity. Focusing on the opportunity and then exploring that and executing accordingly can bring great success.
It's such a great and powerful message. I appreciate that. And I'm glad to see that you've written this book on it, because I think it's a big problem with a lot of people get stuck in a like, oh, I can't do anything about it. And it's like, you can always do something. You can always do something to kind of move forward, even when everything seems to be boxed in. I think there's always ways around. Yeah.
I've had people take this principle and they change their marriage, they change their situations at home. I'll give you an example. I had a client of mine who went through a session and he had a problem with his teenage daughter. And when he spoke about it in the session, people go, "Oh yeah, you know how teenagers can be." And again, that's more conditional mindset. He's like, "No, what can I do?" And he started to reflect that he got into transmit mode, not listening mode. In other words, it really wasn't listening to his daughter. He was going into lecture a lot. And so he went home, and I'll credit him. He changed his whole relationship. But what he ended up doing was really spending quality time with his daughter and just listening to her. And it transformed the relationship. That's an example of saying, okay, what can I do better? So often we're blaming others, but when we blame others, we lose control over the situation. Again, it's not that we're the fault of everything, but it's about what are we going to do about this? So I believe this, and this is why I'm so passionate about the book and the principle as a whole, because it's not only changing our work environment, but even our personal life. If you have a crummy marriage, if you have a crummy family dynamic, instead of focusing on what you can't control, focus on what you can control. There's strategies you can do. And if you're like, I don't know what to do, Google the problem, Chat GPT the problem. My point is, there's so much great content out there that can give you tangible solutions. So don't do what we've always been doing and get the same old results. Try something different.
I love that. Such a great and powerful message. I love that you share that. And again, I love that this is in this book, because I think we need more resources like that. So this has been fantastic. Stephen, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Appreciation. So one of the things that people also don't get the unsaid said about, especially as we're heading into this holiday season, is about appreciation. I've never heard of somebody leaving a company because they were appreciated too much. Can't stand it. Got to get out of here. People appreciate me. Anyway, I'm kind of being silly, obviously. But so what can we do more is don't be stingy and hold back. Share your appreciation. And I don't mean to be all touchy-feely. I'm just saying acknowledge people. And here's how this translates to leadership. If you have somebody on your team who's not doing a great job and you give them feedback and they're starting to improve, often people will say, well, I don't want to say anything because they've got so much more room to grow. But my comeback is, why not acknowledge them for the improvement they're making? People do more of what they're appreciated for. So spend time. You don't have to throw them a party, but you can say, hey, look, I know I gave you that feedback about getting things on time, and I see that you're actually making an effort, and it actually is coming in on time. I know there's other things we've talked about, but I just appreciate that you actually are making some movement on that, and I've seen success. And that charges up people to want to take on other challenges. So appreciate people.
I love that. Such an important part, especially as we're getting around the holidays, right? It's a good reason to do that. You're ending up the year. You're going to be focusing on your goals and stuff for next year. So make sure you appreciate the people that got you where you are this year. So especially if they've made improvements or they've done things that are extraordinary. So fantastic.
Can I say one more thing? I know, and I just want to throw this in because and I want to just show you how a lot of different things to look at this. A lot of times as we're winding up a year, things have gone great. So my comeback to that is, have you thought about why this year was so great? And if it wasn't great all across, I'm talking about areas where things did go well and why. I remember I was talking to the CIO a previous year, and he said, we had a great year. And I said, okay, why? And it was over the phone. He said, that's a really good point. I didn't really think about that. And And the problem is, if we don't know why we achieved or how our team achieved and appreciate them for that, they're not going to duplicate success in the future. And I said to him, why haven't you thought about it? And he said a great point. He said, as leaders, we are programmed to look at problems and solve problems. It doesn't come natural to look at what's going right. We tend to look at what's going wrong and spend a lot of our energy on that. So when we're talking about appreciation, it's not only just appreciating the people and individuals like that, but also appreciate what we've done well as a company, as an organization, and as a team. Highlight that so we can duplicate that success in the future.
I love it. That's so great to hear. I know, for example, I've hired 2 new employees this year that are key resources, and we hit a record performance last month, and it was in the middle of the craziness of trying to get out everything we were trying to get out that month. I took each one of them aside separately, and I said, I love the way this company is today because of you and the energy you bring to our team. And just that simple thing like that, I meant it. It was sincere, but you could see both of them. I said them on different days. You could see them both like just their head was held higher. They were excited to be there, and it just take that time to look at what has gone great and why, and make sure you acknowledge the people that are making it great. Because I think we tend to overlook it. I was guilty of it for years. You reach a plateau and then you go for the next plateau. We never rest as leaders. We're always going for something new, but it's great to sit back and acknowledge, how did we get here? And I think that's important. Fantastic. Stephen, how can our listeners find out more about you, this book, and your company?
So if they go to our website, which is justbehonest.com, there's many ways to get to us, but justbehonest.com. And actually, I want to remind people, so that if they mention the show, we'll give them the Fishes and Sink the Waters Dirty and that all-in accountability document so they can actually be able to help move things forward within their organization or team. And so if they go to justbehonest.com, also we have a couple new books coming out, and then we have a whole online course that they can have access to and stuff like that. So there's a lot of stuff going. But I want to be sure that for them to contact us so we can give them the Fish booklet and the all-in accountability.
Fantastic. And I know one of the new books you got coming up is on culture. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
We're just finishing up that now. But it's called Scaling Culture, how to scale your culture and the non-negotiables of success.
I absolutely love that. Culture is so vital to leadership, and we have to, as leaders, take a proactive approach to building and maintaining our culture. So I'm excited. When that book comes out, we'll have you back. I want to hear more about the culture side and your approach to culture. So, Stephen, I want to thank you for coming on the show. You've given us a lot to think about, and this has been a powerful conversation. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you again. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share, so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Hey, heard you like podcasts. Well, check out Dollar Bets. 2 sports guys with faces for radio, betting live money against each other on air. That's Dollar Bets with a Z. Find us on the Winner's Edge.
Everyone has heard about the U.S. space program, but what is actually going on at NASA? Get the real story in 4 minutes or less with the NASA Daily Podcast from Electricast. Join astronauts and researchers as they conduct groundbreaking experiments, work on the International Space Station, and reach for the stars. NASA Daily, your cosmic update.
Electricast.